If you could find the truth behind any mystery, what would that be? Story 1. I'd like to read the History of the World volumes that were destroyed at the Library of Alexandria. Apparently, it is well known that the materials in the Library of Alexandria were also in a lot of other places, and the library had fires that destroyed portions of it on numerous occasions. People during those times were apparently smart enough to keep valuable knowledge in more than one place, and plenty of people wanted to have the power of knowledge for themselves too, not just in that other guy's place. We didn't lose 1,000 years of progress due to one angry mob. Story 2. I like to know about the thousands of years of undocumented human history. The one thing that fascinates me is, how did wandering affect culture? That is, all our modern culture comes from people with borders. They may not be nation states, but pick any direction and you'll either hit a natural obstacle like a mountain, or a land controlled by other people. But there was a time when that wasn't true. For a few thousand years, if you didn't like where you were, you could just pack up, walk a few kilometers, and be the first person ever there. How did that affect their mindset? Did they have a god of new places? Did they have people who were specialized in scouting out potential places to move to? Story 3. The details of the Bronze Age collapse. We only know very generally what happened. Read 1177 by Eric Klein for details, but precious little specifics, especially who did what and why. Droughts, famines, revolts, piracy, population movement, trade collapse, etc. are all involved. Mycenae, Minoans, Troy, Hittites, Ugarites, etc. Every city from Greece to the Levant was burned down and every city collapsed. Egypt, Assyria, and Babylonia didn't collapse but were severely weakened for centuries. Systems collapse. Basically, here's a really complex system that works really well to organize large-scale societies that are all partly dependent on each other. But it's a big Jenga tower. Too much goes wrong too quickly, so too many critical components fail at once. When that happens, you can't repair the damaged parts faster than they fall apart, so the whole system collapses in on itself and the region goes to hell in a handbasket. Story 4. Dyatlov Pass Incident. 9 Russian hikers died in uncertain circumstances in 1959, and it still hasn't been solved. During the night, something caused them to tear their way out of their tents and flee the campsite, all while inadequately dressed for the heavy snowfall and sub-zero temperatures. Why did they leave? What caused them to run? Did something scare them? Were they scared for their lives? So many questions. Very strange mystery and quite disturbing as well, especially with some of the conspiracies. Story 5. The greatest mystery of them all. Are we in a deterministic universe or does free will exist? They are mutually exclusive, so it can't be some BS about, well, it's both. Nope. Then it would be free will, because any deterministic path was created by the last decision in which there was free will. Aliens would come to Earth just to find out the truth. To all those arguing, commenting here, that it can be both and they are not mutually exclusive, I wholly reject compatibility. I view it as a way for the mind to reconcile the existential crisis that it is confronted with when trying to rationalize these two ideas. If the universe is deterministic, then it makes sense. But then none of my choices matter. But if free will exists, then my choices matter. But then the universe is unpredictable and scary because of the near infinite number of paths it could take, simply due to the choices of sentient beings. Basically, does it make sense and nothing matters, or does it make no sense and everything matters? Story 6. I truly want to see what happened to Amelia Earhart that long century ago. What exactly happened, how she died, and how close we were to finding her remains. Did she die in the crash? Did she survive and live on an island until her death or drown thereafter? How long was she alive? Was she somehow rescued and hid her identity afterward for whatever reason, despite that likely not being the case and is really just a lame conspiracy theory? What the hell happened to Noonan? Story 7. Tokyo Airport, 1956. A man came into the airport with a weird-looking passport, and in it said that he was from the United Kingdom of Taured, which he claimed was located at the border of France and Spain, which is today's Andorra. But this man claims it's the United Kingdom of Taured. The police take him away to a nearby hotel to guard him. They were awake all night in front of his room and went in morning to go check on the man, and he was nowhere to be seen. And the scariest part, all his documents also vanished. Might not seem that scary, but they were in a completely different place. I want to know where he came from and where he went. Story 8. Probably what happened to Chris Kermers and Lisanne Froon. Two girls went on a trip to Panama, and they went on a hike and never came back. Later their bag was found and they had a digital camera. If you look through the pictures, it starts off innocent enough, but as it gets darker, they're clearly not having a good time. And then there's a crap ton of random night pictures that they assumingly were using the flash to try and find their way. They found the foot of one of them still in the boot, and they found a femur as well, but no one knows exactly what happened. Some rumors range from cannibalism to being eaten by wild animals. Story 9. The Princes in the Tower. I've heard arguments that their uncle, Richard III, had them murdered, but on the other end of the spectrum would be Henry VI and his mommy. Henry VII revoked Titus Regius, which had declared the princes illegitimate. Henry VII and his mommy, because they are 100% a pair, were careful and crafty. If there was a snowball's chance in hell that either of those boys were alive, they would have done something else. Richard probably ended them, but it would be nice to know. Story 10. Whether any creatures that we have from mythology, the unicorn for example, were an actual animal that existed but just went extinct, or if there was a freak one-off mutation that gave the foundation to the myth, which is an equally interesting mystery, the ignition point of certain parts of mythology. I think it's fair to assume that dragon stories would have come from, or at least greatly helped along, by someone somehow coming across a dinosaur fossil. Assuming a unicorn was real at one point, it's interesting to consider why there wouldn't be fossils. Presumably the horn wasn't of the right sort of material to survive the process. Story 11. What really caused the Bronze Age collapse. An unknown event or series of events led to the destabilization and downfall of nearly all the major civilizations of the Mediterranean. At least 4 major empires that had each stood for centuries fell within about 50 years. There is almost nothing in the written record and frustratingly scarce archaeological evidence about the cause of this collapse. There's theories, most involving invading peoples driven by drought or climate change or war, but we don't really know any details. One day there's a thriving, interconnected metropolitan civilization building monuments and discovering math and science, and the next there's ruined cities, starving populations, and almost no written records for a century afterward. Story 12. 100% the Pied Piper of Hamelin. When I was in elementary school, our teacher read us a picture book about it. It just ended with the kids following the piper over a hill, and then the end. I remember looking around horrified like, does no one else think this is weird? In the actual German town of Hamelin, the earliest entry regarding the missing children is 1384 from the town record. It reads, "It has been 100 years since our children left." No one knows what happened. Apparently there was a hymnal with reference to it, and an inscription on the side of a house in Hamelin. Story 13. Who ended my great-aunt Vivian. She was committed to a mental hospital after suffering severe brain damage due to her father, my great-grandfather, attacking her with a fireplace poker. She was making progress in adjusting to her condition when a nurse took her out on a day trip and never came back. Vivian was later found abused and without life in a motel room. Her attacker most likely ended her since she fought back. She was 22. My great-grandfather wouldn't let the police investigate her death because he didn't want her death to tarnish the family name. Some years later, the nurse tracked down my great-grandmother and wanted to explain herself and beg for forgiveness, but my great-grandmother refused to talk to her. Vivian was their only daughter. My great-grandfather possibly assaulted his sister-in-law, who was also his cousin, and possibly fathered another daughter, but that is just theory among my relatives, and they refused justice for her. Who does that? Story 14. How the Earth was really made. I believe in the Big Bang Theory, but there are a lot of possibilities. I feel like knowing this would maybe give us a purpose and make it so our lives have some sort of meaning or ultimate goal. I know this will sound cheesy, but for me, the meaning or purpose in whatever you call it of life is just enjoying life itself while you are alive. If you think about it like this, then every little thing starts to give you happiness and serenity. I still sometimes have bad days, but if I look at the general view, I enjoy it, and I had severe depression, but fortunately, I hope I left it all in the past. I try to be positive about life itself and try to be a good human being in general. That's my version of the meaning of life. Story 15. I'm honestly super interested in my own ancestors' history. We know they were nomads and warriors, and brought the first written language and the first religion to India when they migrated. How vast did they travel that Sanskrit can be traced as an origin language even in Europe and all through Asia? How did the first civilizations turn to nomads? Not much else is known. My ethnicity is originally called Aryan, but because of Hitler we don't really say that anymore. Or if we do L, it's quiet. Apparently Hitler thought that we became mole people and hollowed out the Himalayas, especially because Gandhi and India were super anti-Hitler. It's unfortunate a lot of the history is hard to get info on Story 16. Did Billy the Kid really die at the age of 22? The official story is that Sheriff Pat Garrett, Billy's old friend who was paid to track him down and end him, shot him dead at Fort Sumner, New Mexico at 12:30 a.m. on July 14, 1881. But did Billy really die that day? They say that his body was buried at Fort Sumner Cemetery, but all the grave markers were washed away in 1904, so we have no way of knowing if his grave is really there, or if the body they buried that day was even his. Now this is where the uncertainty sets in. Prior to Billy's supposed demise, he was promised a pardon by New Mexico Governor Lew Wallace, which was withdrawn. In 1950, a man known as Brushy Bill Roberts came forward claiming to be the original Billy the Kid. He told stories of the kid's life and potentially filled in the gaps of his life. In short, he knew things that only God and Billy could have known. He promised to tell the whole truth in exchange for his pardon. Unfortunately, he died of a heart attack that same year, never having received his pardon. Upon examining Bill's body, they found 26 bullet and knife scars. 4 men who knew Billy in life were gathered and signed affidavits verifying their belief that Bill was the authentic kid. Story 17, the 6 Russian hikers who were found dead on a mountain. Basically, 6 Russian hikers mysteriously died. Some were found with radiation, and one had their tongue ripped out. No one knows what happened to them as their bodies were away from their tent. Some were barefoot and unclothed in freezing weather. Their tent had evidence of a disturbance that made the hikers rip the tent from the inside to escape from a source. It was believed to be the military, as there was a military item found near their camp. Their bodies were found with numerous injuries, but the injuries were found to be too strong for humans to make. It's one of the greatest unsolved mysteries. This is called the Dyatlov Pass Incident. Story 18. This might be too broad, but I would love to know more about human civilization before written language was developed. Biologically, we've been basically the same for hundreds of thousands of years, and there's ample anthropological evidence of sophisticated, technically capable human societies for much of that time. But except for the few human remains, structures, and tools we have been lucky enough to find, we know nothing about them. There must have been epic stories, massive upheavals, and clashing civilizations in those times. Events that could stand up against the rise and fall of the Roman Empire, or the turmoil of ancient China, or the Aztec Empire. Maybe those civilizations wouldn't be the same numerically, but the important elements would be there. Great and terrible leaders, people living their lives, exploring the world, making great discoveries, all of the things that make us human. But it's all lost forever. We'll never know any of it, because they didn't make the one discovery that would make them immortal. If I had a time machine, that's what I'd love to see. Story 19, the Sphinx in the Pyramids of Giza. There is far more than meets the eye there. I just know it. How if you expanded the pyramid at its ratio, it can fit perfectly inside the earth. What's under the Sphinx, and why? How civilizations, which apparently had barely no contact with one another, built in similar fashion with different esoteric knowledge. Aztecs, Polynesians, and so on. I have many questions and much knowledge has been lost. Turns out that a roughly triangular shape is pretty much ideal if you're stacking blocks on top of other blocks and want to make an impressive structure, but you haven't invented cathedral arches or skyscrapers yet. For the record, Catholic arches and Turkish domes are both civilizations showing off their elite architecture skills, as both require some good maths in carpentry or masonry to achieve. Story 20, the Odessa Catacombs. It fascinates me. There's a giant tunnel or sewer or maze system that could potentially extend miles that we know very little about. People theorize there's hundreds of rooms and it goes on for miles. Yet only a few rooms are available to the public, and even then, only around 10 to 15 rooms have ever been explored and documented and recorded. Just imagine how big it could be, what could be in there, and the amount of bodies. Nobody knows where any people are located, but there must be a lot of bodies in there. It's the perfect climate there to mummify bodies to not decay, and a large number of people entering non-public allowed parts to explore and see how far it goes have never returned. What really intrigues me is the story of Masha. Imagine how horrifying it must be to drunkenly stumble around in there, get lost, and keep wandering. Eventually, your phone dies and it's pitch black. You run around for days screaming and calling for help, but nobody hears you and you can't find the exit. The entire time you're cold, hungry, thirsty, and tired. Eventually, you come to understand you'll die there. You last a few days, and then your body isn't discovered for years. Hell, people argue whether she existed. They claim the picture with the people posing with her body, and the reports of military personnel removing the body are fake. They're not entirely to blame. If the theories are true and the government tried to hide her death, they did a good job. If you search on public records, there's no evidence Masha even ever existed. Story 21. The hidden treasure of ancient temples like Padmanabhaswamy Temple in India. This temple supposedly has 8 mysterious vaults of treasure, and only 5 of which had been opened till now, with the actual content found to be hidden to the public, but it's estimated to be worth US $22 billion. There's a secret Vault B which has never been opened for centuries. All attempts to open it in the past had failed. This vault supposedly has a very high profile security which they failed to crack. It is believed by the commoners that this vault must never be opened, and they vehemently oppose this action, as according to belief it would bring the wrath of God upon the people. However, it is a sheer delight to decode this mystery of this vault. This vault has a very large iron door with huge serpents over it. Story 22. There are lots and lots of missing pieces in Hindu mythology. The Supreme Lord Brahma actually explained relativity. 1 second in Brahma's world is like a millennium on earth, I'm not sure of the exact number. And in another sacred mantra called Hanuman Chalisa, the author Tulasidas clearly gives the exact distance from earth to sun. And many more instances like this have lots and lots of scientific theories or concepts in them. How? Story 23. What actually happened on board United 93 on 9/11? And what are the contents of the cockpit recordings? What actually happened to MH370? Where is Jimmy Hoffa? Where is Jim Gray? Where is Alexander the Great's tomb? What happened to the Franklin expedition? What actually happened to the 9th Legion? What happened to that aircraft squadron that went missing in the Bermuda Triangle? What happened to the missing pages of John Wilkes Booth's diary? And what did they say? Where is Jason Derrick Brown? Where is Robert William Fisher? Where is Henrik Himmler? How did the crew of the Challenger actually die? Where is Harold Holt? What's in the Vatican's secret archives? And where is Blackbeard? Story 24. What did we do when we met the other species of humans we interacted with? Were the interactions as diverse as our interactions with each other? What did we think of them? Were they like aliens and never relatable? Were our genes mixed consensually or knowingly? Did we end them all, or did we just happen to survive and they didn't? I have so many questions about the other species of humans and what it was like for these species to interact. What a world it would be if there were 2 or 3 entirely different species of human. Story 25. I would want to know how much knowledge was lost with the Library of Alexandria, and how much it set civilization back, I guess. More frivolously, if Atlantis were a real thing, I'd be curious what aspects were real, and what happened to sink it in such a dramatic manner. Even more absurd, what particular thing was it that was the final straw and destroyed Rasputin? I understand this is a morbid curiosity, but I'm curious nonetheless. Unfortunately, even as I sit here, I recall another mystery that has stymied so many. Is the Voynich manuscript a very elaborate hoax or something more? I guess it's just as well that I'm not going to be given the opportunity to seek a single answer. I'd never settle on any one thing. Story 26. A lot of great ones mentioned so far that I'd love to know about, so I'll pick a more down-to-earth one. What happened to Richie Edwards, former guitarist for the band Manic Street Preachers? He checked out of a hotel on February 1st, 1995, the day he was supposed to fly to the US to begin a tour with the band, and has never been seen again. There have been several alleged sightings over the years, but nothing ever verified. He was declared to be presumed dead by his family's estate in 2008, but nobody has ever found any evidence either way, due to his history of depression, self-harming, and alcohol abuse. The prevailing theory is that he took his life, most likely throwing himself off the Severn Bridge. However, those close to him have maintained that he was never one to contemplate taking his life, and no body has ever been recovered. Story 27, I have a few, and for good reason. First, the Chinese terracotta soldiers, because no crap. Second, King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. We know that the king himself existed, but some of his stories refer to magic, water sprites like ladies in lakes, and women who are actually attracted to you. We can unravel the real story of this dude and separate truth from fiction. Third, the stories of Irish legend in general. There are some crazy stories about Fionn McCool, the legendary Fianna warriors, Tir na Nog, etc. They are all connected, and I would love to find out the truth in them. Story 28. I would find out what happened to the lost colony of Roanoke. A whole colony of people disappeared without a trace, except for the singular name of an island or a Native American tribe scratched into a tree or bench, Croatoan. The true history behind the Winchester Mansion, because there's just so many rumors around it that it would be nice to know if any of them actually stick. I mean, was she actually talking to spirits and demons, or was she just having a really bad mental breakdown? Story 29. Why the Neanderthals and Denisovans really died off. Were they marginalized by modern humans, one, and dwindled due to lack of access to prime game and food sources? Did we outprocreate them, having many more children than they did while also interbreeding, until there were no more true full Neanderthals or Denisovans left? Did we hunt and end them in a prehistoric genocide? Were they unable to respond to difficult situations with creative solutions, and or unable to adapt or adopt new technologies? Needle, domestication of the dog, atla'u or spear throwers, etc. Did they die of diseases caused by germs brought into their territories by modern humans? Story 30. So it's rumored that Donald Trump lost more money in the 90s through stupid business ventures than anyone in the entire world. He may even be the biggest loser in history, not by quantity, but by rate of loss, even with his meager former fortune from daddy. I want to know exactly how much he lost and get a great line chart outlining his net worth declining over time on a weekly basis. Also a second line graph showing how much money he had coming in fake loans from foreign powers that are pretty much just purchasing and controlling him over time.